Welcome back to day 2 of the Dreamforce 21 sessions. Today's focus is on build. So what's all the buzz about Slack? Why did Salesforce acquire them for over $27 billion? Adrian King kicks off the day with his perspective on Slack and their huge potential. But before that, let's get the party started with a classic dance track from our house band, Jane Blonde and the Goldfingers. Everybody wants to rule the world. Salesforce's announcement is that it is now Slack first. Adrian King, co-founder and CTO of Elements.cloud, explores the powerful customization capabilities of Slack, the people-centric integrations, and the implications of managing development in Slack.
With Salesforce acquisition of Slack earlier this year, we're starting to see or hear the term Slack first appear everywhere. And it's very clear that the Slack acquisition is a major part of Salesforce's strategy going forward. We at Elements have been using Slack for several years now as our messaging platform, and it's pretty well embedded into the way we do business. But it's interesting that even us, we've just been trying to get our heads around what Slack first really means and actually start to unpick the opportunities that Slack really provides when you start to understand the power that exists on the platform. But there are lots of implications. As part of our sort of unwrapping what Slack really means, we actually sort of stood back and thought about what is it that Slack really provides us. And we realized that it's all about how important conversation is. If I think about the way I work and engage with my family, my friends, a conversational approach with technology is now the default. We use WhatsApp for communicating with my wife, my children, with my friends, but not just peer-to-peer, one-to-one, but actually we have our family WhatsApp group. I have my cycling WhatsApp group. All of the conversations I'm having out there that traditionally I might have had in person, I'm now having using technology, and it's ubiquitous. It's the way we work. And what we're thinking about is that business is now catching up. I'm sufficiently old, and my children find this very amusing, that I remember actually sending written memos around the office if we actually wanted to communicate information. And and I think it was 1988, we got our first internal email system. And instead of writing memos, we were now able to send email and documents and dramatically speed up communication between different people on different floors of the building or in different buildings. That was fantastic, but actually it's not a natural way to engage with people. And 10, 15 years ago, we started to use Skype and then Google Chat to actually have one-to-one and actually a level of group conversations. So we started to move back to conversation, but it still didn't take away from using email heavily to move documents around and share content. But what we found in the last couple of years, and particularly actually in the last few months, as we've really started to embrace the Slack platform, is what I call smart conversations. And by smart conversations are ones where we're integrating the systems and data and people in the conversation. What we're starting to see is how the conversations now are triggered by something which happens in the system, starts a conversation in the channel, and make sure that the right people are invited to the conversation. That we can, during the conversation, easily access and share useful information and data, whether that's from systems like Salesforce or Jira that we use, or whether or not it's easily accessing a particular document that is in Google Drive or in Box or in any of the other systems out there in which information is stored. And then it can actually trigger using the very interesting and powerful workflow capabilities that Slack have to actually trigger a new system flow, actually request capturing form data so that we can actually capture a bit of new information to put into the conversation. And actually, sometimes, and it may sound a bit strange, actually people can have conversations one-on-one with the systems to get work done. Instead of having to go into Salesforce, I now just talk to Salesforce to go and request information, and it serves it straight up in the same user interface. And what we're suddenly discovering is that instead of using email as a very document-centric, send information, wait for it to come back mode of communication, we're now using one interface to have conversations and talk with people, bring people into chats, set up a new channel, talk to third parties. It's a very, very natural way of communicating, and it allows us with the, instead of the I don't want to use the word dumb conversations, but basic conversations we were having with prior technologies, we're now using these smart conversations. However, we're also at Elements seeing an emerging tension between how we use the technology. Slack is very firmly aimed at the citizen developer. Anybody can set up a new channel. It's very easy to build workflows around that channel, to add a bit of intelligence and support to move information and make it easy to engage people around the conversation. But at the same time, we're starting with Slack first, and the power of the integrations into the technology to start to see Slack becoming part of the IT landscape. At Elements, we're re-engineering our client onboarding process at the moment. We're going right back to understand exactly how we wish to onboard our clients to make the most of our Elements platform. We are treating each engagement as a project. We're using the Cloud Coach project management system, part of the a managed app on the platform, to be the core data for managing each of our onboarding projects. But very explicitly, as part of our thinking about how we want this process to work, we want to be Slack to be right at the center of that, because it's actually about pulling all the different stakeholders in the business together and ensuring that the conversation occurs in a sensible way to actually deliver the outcome, which is a successfully onboarded customer. So right at the beginning, the solution design has Slack built into it. The requirements are talking about how we engage. The requirements have collaboration and conversation built into the requirements. Our business process mapping and modeling how we want the business to work has Slack as part of it. That's turning then into a build phase where we are building out how we're going to make the processes work, how ensuring that the Cloud Coach is properly configured, but also how Slack is integrated into this process. It is now part of the IT build process, and it needs to be managed as such. So we have this formal use of Slack as a core IT resource at the same time as, and we don't want to stop it, the fact that end users can extend Slack, build their own workflows. And you're starting to see a tension between these two, the very ad hoc and the formal. And we've got to ensure that as we make changes to our business, those changes don't affect the Slack implementation, or more to the point, they may well affect the Slack implementation, but we need to know about that impact such that we can ensure that either there is no change we need to make to Slack, or that actually the changes we're making mean that we need to make these changes to Slack as well to ensure that things continue to work. The fact is that we use Jira and Salesforce, and I think right now we have 19 applications in our Slack, and that will grow. Any change that we make to any of those applications, and some of them are extremely configurable, Salesforce, for example, but Jira is extremely configurable. Any changes to that configuration might have an impact on the way we're using Slack. And the last thing we want is for our end users who are increasingly using Slack to suddenly have either Slack giving them the wrong information because actually we've made a change to some statuses and they now aren't being alerted on that particular status which now exists, or some data has changed, or we want the process to run differently and people have codified the process. So it's the impact of change now absolutely touches Slack. But how do we know? Well, actually, it's all about treating Slack just as another one of our systems in the way we think about change. And the way we think about change is we use the Elements platform, our own platform, to build the configuration model of how we've configured Salesforce. And we now use it to around how we've configured Jira and how we've configured MailChimp. So we've got configuration models captured in Elements around these core platforms, which allows us to use all of the standard Elements capabilities to manage that change. What we've actually are working on, and we've done an initial implementation for ourselves, is actually getting the Slack metadata, the Slack configuration, into an Elements configuration model. What this now allows us to do is to integrate all of our change management and all the visibility of as we're making changes, can we start to understand the impact on the channels, the workflows that are in Slack? And it looks just like any other one of our configuration models. Clearly, the one that people know most is our Salesforce configuration model. But we've also had the ability to build a Jira configuration model, which we'll be releasing in the not too distant future. And the one which is really interesting, and I say is being driven by our own needs, as well as clearly a major need in the market, which is to understand how Slack is being configured. Slack is now a key part of the software landscape for many organizations. And with Salesforce now behind Slack, and with Salesforce driving the Slack first concept, that Slack is going to be where you go as a user to be engaged in doing business, being able to use that smart conversational capability. You've got to understand how to exploit Slack. It's an enormously powerful platform, but the more you exploit it, the more you need to actually apply a formal implementation approach to make sure that change doesn't break the way you've implemented Slack. And to do that, you need to understand the configuration knowledge of what have you done to Slack, such that when change comes along, you actually know whether or not it's going to impact the Slack platform. We're on a fascinating journey here at Elements with our own implementation of Slack and realizing how much power there is in the platform. But what it is really highlighted is that it is just another system that needs to be managed in the totality of your landscape. I would love to hear your feedback. Please reach out to me at Adrian@Elements.cloud. Let me know how you're using Slack. Let me know how you are managing the configuration knowledge of your Slack implementation and the impact of change on Slack. It's a fascinating journey we're on, and Elements is going to be there to support you all the way through it.
Vern Keenan is an industry analyst covering DevOps. He talks about how improving DevOps tools enables agile management. He'll provide a bird's eye view of Salesforce DevOps that helps architects and platform owners make smart decisions.
I'm Vernon Keenan from SalesforceDevOps.net. Let's commit. I've spent 2021 curating and cataloging the companies, products, and services that help Salesforce customers deliver enterprise applications. Here is what I've learned. Let's get our arms around DevOps. It seems to be the latest Salesforce buzzword, and it has turned into a powerful word indeed. If you are doing DevOps today, that indicates you are managing how to build the means of production for your organization. If you want to exist as an enterprise in the digital domain, then you need DevOps to have the automation capabilities that delivers enterprise app updates and continuously improves app value. The origin of the DevOps concept started in 2007, when its main push was to find ways to obliterate barriers between app developers and system operators. Developers became frustrated with the time it took to iterate on software builds when dealing with operational teams. This diagram from Azure DevOps portrays it beautifully. It shows how better communication results in the collaboration and teamwork necessary to manage, develop, and deliver and operate a live application. It shows the main benefit of using DevOps, which is to have a mechanism that allows teams to respond quickly to user behavior. Another key to the success of DevOps is the idea of metrics and observability, and how that dovetails with agile management philosophies, such as tying metrics into objectives and key results. In fact, I'd say that DevOps and Agile have been kissing behind the barn, and a new unified app production perspective is evolving, which I call DevOps 3.0. More on that in a bit. One reason why DevOps has gained prominence is because it represents the convergence of three huge business forces. First, Salesforce is now a business transformation platform, not just a CRM. Since the platform is strategic for many more businesses, executives need a governance harness and a better visibility into app production activities. Next, an all-pervasive force in modern information technology is the incredibly rich and diverse world of cloud-native computing. When engineers at Uber, Salesforce, Netflix, or a new startup need tools to build an online service from scratch, they are using cloud-native computing tools and services. Until 2017, Salesforce was largely a closed platform to the cloud-native world. Then, SFDX CLI was introduced, and that really made Salesforce DevOps take off. It allowed Linux scripts and cloud-native tools to now interact with the configuration information inside of Salesforce. That subsequently let cloud-native automation tools like Jenkins and Azure DevOps act as a command server in a release management pipeline orchestration scheme. I made this relationship classification system to help figure out if all the boxes are checked when you are building a continuous app delivery system in Salesforce. This diagram gives you an idea of the complexity involved in a Salesforce DevOps solution. So, the good news is we have better roadmaps for how to build a DevOps solution, but the bad news is there are lots of things to do and a lot of systems that need to be tied together. That is where a key software vendor like Gearset comes into play. Salesforce DevOps platform vendors are all working to check off these boxes for you, so they are worth a look if you are getting started. Now let's take a look at that mess of products and companies and reorganize them into this stack. This summary shows how Salesforce DevOps is first controlled by the governance functions, which collects metrics and data from the app production teams. Next, these teams of architects, developers, admins, business analysts, and constituents use a consistent set of automation and deployment tools to continuously optimize apps. One key thing that makes this different for Salesforce apps is the curious way in which we must manage metadata. The key function in Salesforce DevOps is that metadata must be ingested, analyzed, queried, and dynamically updated. When updating a live org, an intelligent metadata system is the only way for an app production team to effectively work together. There must be intelligent metadata management of any DevOps platform in order to optimize your Salesforce release management processes. Now we are expanding the pyramid to show some of the functional layers in a full-fledged Salesforce DevOps solution, pretty much like what you get with Gearset. Here we can see some of the more familiar names and details that go into creating a full DevOps solution. I call it an industry map because if you go to the Salesforce DevOps.net site and go to the map section, you can basically click on any of these categories and see the companies that I've curated. Now let's explode this out some more. Ben McCarthy of Salesforce Ben and I worked together to design this periodic table of DevOps solutions, which will be published September 27th on his site. So you are getting a world premiere preview of this new infographic. You can see the categories I laid out in the ontology and map illustrations. If a company has a product in a category, it gets a badge. You can see the G symbol for Gearset showing up in multiple categories since they are a leading DevOps platform. So be sure to watch out for that article, which will come out the week after Dreamforce, or you can go to salesforcedevops.net right now to find these products and companies. So what is next for Salesforce DevOps? Well, there are some blank spaces in the Salesforce DevOps world right now that need filling in. First, we need better observability and metrics that go beyond application performance monitoring and the basics of security dashboards. We need user activity dashboards, performance monitoring, and better incident response management. Next, customers need to put on their cybersecurity big boy pants and start moving second-generation testing and application security into their DevOps pipelines. As we all know, studies have shown that fixing an outage versus fixing a bug in development is 100 to 1,000 times more efficient. We don't have time to delve heavily into this diagram, but I wanted to show how ultimately Salesforce sits alongside other application service providers like SAP or Oracle ERP Online. As systems become more intertwined, a need for a holistic view, which I call App DevOps, is emerging. This seems like a natural evolution as the need for multi-cloud orchestration increases. Some Salesforce-compatible orchestration and command servers already offer limited multi-cloud capabilities. As we get more into 2022, I think that management topics will continue to influence the DevOps conversation. I included a graphic from another recent article on the site where I show how Agile and DevOps are converging into what we really need to think about, which is application value delivery. And I'm telling IT to stop telling their management that they need to adopt a DevOps culture. Instead, start telling management we need DevOps so management has the tools to figure out what is going on with digital projects. What seems to be happening is that IT projects should be managed more like how you manage your whole company, since just about every business of every kind needs to perform in the digital domain. DevOps shouldn't be seen as the mysterious cultural shift. Instead, DevOps should be seen as the way to make an agile, measurements-based management philosophy work for an enterprise. This should start the path to using the same tools to manage day-to-day business activities as for app production. I wanted to leave you with some links to articles on salesforcedevops.net you might want to reference. You can download the PDF of this presentation and get the links to these articles using the QR code. So in summary, I see a lot going on in Salesforce DevOps. The top 5 platforms are servicing a lot of big, complicated clients. But there's also seems to be a lot of room for growth in the fat middle of the market. I hope the cloud-native world continues to be interested in including Salesforce in their offerings, because that should help broaden the appeal of Salesforce DevOps. I don't see making decisions about how to move forward with DevOps solutions getting easier anytime soon. As you get a sense from the periodic table of DevOps solutions, if you choose to build a new solution from the ground up with cloud-native tooling, you can do it if you have the skills and it fits your needs. A homebrew DevOps solution can be a whole lot faster and more targeted than getting involved in a vendor solution. But If you don't have cloud native experience, then the Salesforce specific products from Gearset, Elements.cloud, and Provar are likely better choices.
Claudia McPhail is a sales engineer at Gearset. She'll talk about how to measure and grow the DevOps maturity of Salesforce teams. You'll discover how a mature DevOps strategy impacts business, builds operational resilience, and why that's important.
I'm Claudia and I'm a sales engineer at Gearset. I've been with the company around 2 years and I help our clients to reach DevOps maturity with their workflows and to develop custom business solutions which suit their specific needs. If you don't know Gearset, it's an application used by thousands of admins and developers for end-to-end DevOps, so they can collaborate on building and releasing great solutions for Salesforce. We have offices in Chicago, Cambridge, and London, and we work with our customers to help them successfully adopt robust processes and reach DevOps maturity. DevOps maturity is a gradual process of adopting new tools and best practices to move towards more agile and automated workflows. In this session, we will look at how teams can assess their maturity and the key actions that teams can take to become more mature in their DevOps processes. We'll also look at why it's important to implement robust DevOps processes and tools. So, you've probably heard more and more about DevOps, and that's because there has been an unprecedented shift in the Salesforce world towards DevOps over the last year or so. Teams with a robust DevOps strategy will be embracing practices such as version control, continuous integration, automation, and automated testing, as well as backup. With these tools and processes in place, teams have more confidence in their deployments because they have fast release cycles. They can reliably manage parallel projects, and they know that they're also resilient against disaster. All this helps them to deliver innovative changes, provide more value to end users, and ultimately drive business growth. If you find yourself running into issues as your team grows in complexity, it's a sign that your processes also need to grow and reach that next level of maturity. As your DevOps process improves and matures, you'll start to reap more benefits. So here is Gearset's DevOps maturity model, and this helps us to assess a team's level of DevOps maturity. By looking at things like processes, tooling, and performance, we can see roughly where they might sit on the maturity scale, and then identify likely challenges and common next steps to take. The key is that the DevOps adoption is an incremental process, and it's good to approach it as a series of stages. Let's walk through each of these 5 stages and look at how we characterize them. The first stage is beginner. Teams in this stage haven't really started DevOps adoption. They deploy to production very infrequently, and long-running in-org projects mean changes often wait for a long time before getting released. When the changes are released, there's normally a lot to deploy all in one go, which brings with it tricky and time-consuming deployments and a higher likelihood of post-deployment issues. These teams are almost always using change sets, and pretty much everything to do with a release is performed manually. Moving away from change sets is an important way to graduate beyond the beginner stage and will dramatically speed up deployment time, as well as increase the deployment success rate. For example, teams using Gearset for their deployments do so up to 12 times faster than change sets, and on average, 91% of their deployments work first time. Next, we have the novice. Novice teams have realized that change sets can be a bottleneck and don't really work for teams wanting to make more frequent or complex changes. They're usually using a third-party tool for their deployments instead. They still don't deploy super frequently, and when they do, it's still directly org to org, but it happens more frequently than before because their tools have made it less painful. In this group, there's still no true version control adoption or other types of automation, but novice teams occasionally use version control as a metadata backup, where they periodically commit the metadata from production to version control. Although this isn't using version control for true source-driven development, it does help teams familiarize themselves with the basics of interacting with Git. To move to the next step here, teams need to adopt version control more fully. Version control lays the foundation that will unlock all the benefits of a mature DevOps process. So stage 3 here is the practitioner. These folks are a good way along the DevOps journey. They are usually releasing at the end of weekly or bi-weekly sprints, but long-running projects aren't always released in slices, so some change can still be left waiting to be deployed for months. These teams normally use version control as a source of truth for at least some metadata types. Some changes are still made outside of a source-driven process, usually due to siloed admin and dev teams. Teams that are new to using version control might be using it in a slightly unconventional way that mirror their old processes, rather than in the way it could be most impactful. However, version control opens the doors to automation, and it's common to see continuous integration and a move towards a process of continuous delivery at this stage, at least for the earlier environments in the release pipeline, like integration and UAT. The key to moving beyond this stage is to make the most of automation and adopt robust version control workflows across all areas of the team. Teams in stage 4 are leaders. They release at least once per sprint, and features rarely languish for longer than a sprint without being released. Their lead time may be slowed down, however, as they often depend on external teams for approvals. Version control is used as a source of truth, and most metadata types are deployed via version control. On the whole, the entire team are following the same process using tools that suit them. Some might use the DX and Git CLIs. Others might use third-party tools like Gearset to get their changes into and out of Git. But regardless of the exact tool they use, the process is the same. They've also unlocked the benefits of end-to-end CI/CD, which saves time and increases agility for the team. The key way to move beyond this stage is to make sure the process is reliable and resilient, with automated and on-demand backups of data and metadata integrated into the DevOps cycle to allow for a rapid and accurate recovery when things go wrong. The last stage is the luminary stage, and it's quite rare to find a team ticking all of these boxes. They've managed to overcome the organizational challenges that hold teams in the leader category back, which means they have few or no external dependencies, slowing down their change process. This means they ship regularly, often daily, and whenever they've got new changes to deliver. The frequency of shipping actually dramatically reduces the complexity of their process because they only rarely need to hold subsets of changes back at release time. Backup adoption in this group is high. Having robust backup and restore tools, processes, and strategies ensures business continuity in the case of a disaster, and is the final piece of the DevOps puzzle. It gives teams the confidence to introduce innovative solutions because they trust their release process and its recoverability. Even better, teams that use the same tool for releases and backups can restore data using their familiar deployment workflows, making the process even faster. So we've gone through the different stages of DevOps maturity and seen what makes each step different from the last. As I said at the start, it's important to remember that DevOps adoption is a step-by-step process. Identify where you sit on that model and think about what you can do to get to the next step. It can be daunting to figure out where to begin with improving your DevOps process, but there are a few things you can do to get a plan up and running. First, you need to analyze what your company is looking to get out of Salesforce and create some goals. And think ahead. Your current release process might just about support your current workload, but it may not do so as you grow. Then you can build a roadmap to success. Make sure the team is aligned on what you want to achieve and split the work up into manageable chunks. It's important not to rush ahead and layer on DevOps complexity too quickly. It's a stepping stone approach to success. When planning this roadmap, you'll need to evaluate what DevOps tooling you need, whether it's first-party tooling or a complete DevOps solution like Gearset. Figure out what your process will look like, and then find tools that will make that possible without months of implementation and ramp-up time. Measuring DevOps performance as you scale your process is really important too. Try and identify the metrics that matter to you and start tracking them. For example, the frequency of the team's releases. By understanding the impact that DevOps is having, you'll be able to make gradual improvements and keep tweaking your process to align with your long-term scalable goals. Whatever stage you're at with your current development process and release process, I hope this talk has helped you to assess where you stand in terms of DevOps maturity and given you some insight into the next steps your team should take. It's been a pretty quick introduction to DevOps maturity, but at Gearset we have many resources that can help you evaluate your maturity in more depth. My email address is here on the slide, so just drop me a message if you would like to see some of the documentation, or if you'd like to have more in-depth conversations with one of the team.
Today, I want to talk to you about how to adopt a toolset that matches your Salesforce DevOps ambitions. In this brief session, I'm going to introduce you to the key elements that make up a DevOps toolset, how they work for your business, and what to look for when making your decisions. You will hopefully be familiar with the benefits of adopting DevOps for Salesforce operations. Before you begin investigating tools to enable the implementation of DevOps, ensure your business is committed to the operational and organizational changes it will be making in order to be successful. These can loosely be defined as people changes, how your teams are structured and managed. This may need to change, and are you aware of what needs to happen? State of Salesforce management. What state are your Salesforce orgs in? How are the changes made and recorded? Who has access to make them, and how are they backed up? Resourcing. Do you have the people with capacity and knowledge to set up and manage this new implementation? Budget. Do you have budget to purchase the right solution or tool set, including installation, onboarding, and all ongoing maintenance? If you have this figured out, it's time to explore what needs to be considered to choose the right solution. First, you need to find a tool that is designed specifically for the platform you wish to implement DevOps. In our case, this means Salesforce. There are a vast array of DevOps-ready tools available that claim general or specialist focuses, and you need to be careful you are choosing a tool not just designed for Salesforce, but built by people who understand the complex nature of the platform. You need to be aware of copy-paste tools that claim dedicated support and functionality, but really produce a template that only fits Salesforce release management processes. You also need to be aware of hidden charges associated with the platform. You may find some basic tools that become expensive when you add on functionality required to successfully use them for your DevOps processes. And make sure you're confident the tool will continue to be developed. If the provider doesn't appear to have a dedicated roadmap for Salesforce, be careful you won't be left with an unsupported platform or a tool that is lacking provision for newer functionality. A DevOps solution needs to provide tooling that covers key aspects of the Salesforce release cycle. These are deployments for both metadata and data, continuous integration or enabling automated continuous delivery, monitoring, which is automated alerts and notifications on key aspects of the process, testing, automated unit tests with that integrated monitoring, and finally, backup for both metadata and data that protects your orgs, provides rapid recovery, and ensures compliance. The more individual tools you need to get this complete DevOps solution, the bigger the risk of failure you will introduce. Your solution should have a simple, integrated UI that links all these areas together, ensuring your teams can rely and work seamlessly together. Before investing in a tool, you need to consider your workflows. These will most likely be focused around the deployment process, such as version control, repository management, collaboration, and approvals. Of course, if you are new to DevOps, you may want to consider updating your DevOps processes before you look at the tools you need. Think about what processes and workflows will help you achieve your DevOps goals, and then find tools that enable these workflows. The tooling you adopt needs to work with your processes and tools rather than against them. This could be as simple as providing a direct integration with Git, or allow your team to set up their pipelines in a way that is familiar and of most use to them. Simple integration with your tech stack is also an important consideration. Think about the tools you currently use directly in your DevOps teams, as well as the wider business. For maximum impact, your DevOps solution must be able to integrate with these other tools to handle the accurate flow of information and keep teams working well together. When choosing a solution, make a list of other tools in your stack, such as version control, monitoring, and ticketing systems, and challenge the vendor to confirm and demonstrate how they will work together. Ask if the integrations are native to the tool, use an API, or another connection method like a webhook. Make full use of your trial to properly test whether this integration works for you. Even the best tools will go wrong from time to time, so be certain the one you are investing in comes with the support you need to keep your operations running. When it comes to pricing, check what is included as standard in your plan and what might cost extra. Check the SLAs, especially the response time and out-of-hours support, and also test out the responsiveness and helpfulness of support during your trial period. When you're considering the implementation of the tool, investigate what is required to get up and running once you have completed the purchase. Is it something you can do yourself, or is it more in-depth consultative approach required? If the latter, what is included and what costs extra? This is also something to keep in mind during your trial period. Do you have a fully installed trial of the solution to test out, or is it more of a secluded experience controlled by the vendor? Also, what are differences between that, the complete solution you will have to install, and what extra costs do you need to consider? Remember, the core reason for implementing DevOps is to enable cultural changes within your business, make collaboration between your teams simple and easy, ensure deployments are iterative, responsive, and high quality, deliver real value to your users, and drive business growth. Refer to these points as you progress through your evaluation to be certain the solution you're intending to invest in helps you achieve your goals. Having one tool like Gearset makes this easier. With Gearset, we give you deployments that work. With Gearset's rapid, reliable deployments and intuitive design, it lets you focus on release and not just the management. Also with deployments, we allow for deploying of data for testing and debugging. This will quickly move records between your orgs while maintaining those object relationships. Our monitoring jobs will then be able to notify you of changes within your metadata and data, whether they were done through Gearset or not. What would happen if someone deleted a data set from your org or an entire org got corrupted? With Gearset's intelligent backup and restore solution, you can restore faster than ever. Take a look at Gearset.com to learn more about our complete DevOps solution, or get in touch with me to discuss your requirements further.
Michael Dailey, a DevOps consultant at Provar, will explore the recommended practices for developing scalable build processes, including structure, orgs, test environments, smoke test projects, verification process, and test reporting structure.
Hey everybody, my name is Gabe Rodriguez. I work for Provar. I'm here to talk to you about building scalable Salesforce automation solutions within the DevOps structure. Here are a few of the things that we're going to be talking to you about today. First of all, we're going to show you what Provar is and what it does. Then we're going to talk about what does that mean for DevOps. We're going to then show you a CI/CD pipeline demonstration, and then ultimately wrap up with why does any of that matter. Like I said, my name is Gabe Rodriguez. I've been a software developer for about 15 years. I'm working with Provar in a capacity where I'm interfacing with engineering and the external customer base and helping them understand what Provar can do. Here's my friend Mike.
Thanks, Gabe. My name is Michael Dailey. I'm a DevOps consultant, been with the company here about 2.5 years, and I've been in the industry for almost 8. I'm going to be walking through a demonstration of what Provar can do. All right, so I'm going to be walking you through an example of a business scenario in the Provar Test Builder. On the right side of my screen is Provar Test Builder. This is our Chrome extension that allows us to interface with the UI and build test cases on the fly. On the left side here is my actual UI. In this case, I'm logged into a Salesforce org. I'm going to be showing you a email to case scenario. So we're going to be going through and sending an email, generating it from the Provar application, and then searching for that case and validating in the UI. So I'm just going to click resume here to play this test case through. But basically everything's going to be happening in the context of Provar. We're going to be sending the message, the email message as Provar. We're going to be searching and doing all the UI actions using the test automation. So here it's navigating to the case view, and from here we're going to search for our existing case record. We're using a subject variable that we created ahead of time. At the beginning of the test case, we actually created a number of different parameters and variables that we're going to use to both perform our validations, but also to populate the fields that we're going to be filling in. Things like the email contents, the subject of the email, the to and the from, and also the email signature. Great, so we searched and we found our case that we just created through email. We can confirm that with the timestamp there. From here, we're going to validate some things like the case subject, the email signature, the context of the email, the case origin, just to confirm that that is actually email as it should be. And then lastly, it's going to confirm the web email address of the sender of this particular email that was generated. And while all this is spinning here, we're just comparing what we see in the UI to our variables that we created up above. So we can make this test case dynamic. We can make it data-driven. Those same concepts apply to Provar as well. Once the validation has completed, the next step is going to be sending an email response as the customer success representative, and then updating the case details on this particular case object. So we're going to be replying to this particular email that was sent that generated the case as the customer success rep, which in this case is going to be myself. So we're going to change the from pick list to be my email address. And then we're also going to set the subject field of this email message to include the case number. So that way when we reply to it, the customer has knowledge of the case number that was created in Salesforce. We're also going to populate the body of the email message. And then the last phase is, of course, sending the email message. So once the email has been sent, Provar will do a quick scroll of the page because we are taking a screenshot of this particular page at this time for reporting purposes. Great, so the email has now been sent. The next step is to update our case details. So we're just going to update a couple of the fields for this particular case, namely the case reason. We're going to update that to be equipment complexity. And then we're also going to update the status pick list to working to let the customer know that we are working on their case. Once both of these fields have been updated in the UI, we're going to click Save and save the case. At that point in time, we're going to go to the last step of our end-to-end flow, which is going to be verifying the email response on the client side. This is going to happen very quickly, but essentially what's going to happen is we're going to verify the email that has been replied, that has been sent by the customer success rep, and we're going to assert all the fields that we created as variables up above. So all of that came back positive. And the last step here is just a cleanup phase. We're querying for the case that we created, and then we're navigating to the case record, which we already have it open here. Then we're going to be performing that quick deletion here just to clean up our test data so there's no lingering case records. And the case has now been deleted. So that was a simple Salesforce UI flow. Now I'm going to show another example here. This one's going to be in the conference application, which is a React app that Gabe is going to be talking a little bit more about and making a deployment update to. He's going to be updating to show a new banner message here. I've already executed this test case in the interest of time, but just to show you what it's doing, we basically just validated all of these checkboxes here matched and that we had the correct speaking opportunities for each of the different session types. So that concludes my portion of the Provar demo. I'm going to hand it back over to Gabe, who's going to talk more about our CI/CD pipeline.
Thanks, Mike, for that demo. So as Mike just showed, what we're showing is that Provar can be incorporated into our software development lifecycle. As any DevOps organization needs to maintain, they go from requirements through deployment, bug fixes, goes in a cyclical loop. We're continually maintaining this particular lifecycle. Now, why did he show you both the Salesforce org and the front-end application? The reason why is even though that we deal specifically with Salesforce and we interact primarily with those orgs that are Salesforce-centric, the business users are more than likely the ones interfacing with the Salesforce org. You don't extend Salesforce to your end users typically. You will go about the process of building out some sort of front-end application that may communicate with Salesforce, but that's what you extend to your end users. And what we wanted to show you is that the Provar tool suite can integrate with either of those two builds. They're indifferent to the Provar tool suite. And so that was the point of showing you both of those particular demonstrations. Now what we want to transition into and show you is the CI/CD pipeline. We're going to use the AWS tool suite. No particular reason for doing that other than to not get overly close to a particular tool suite. This is pretty agnostic. You can see that there will be a Jenkins integration. This is because the predominance of our clients are using Jenkins for their build pipelines. Both AWS and Jenkins will integrate with Provar seamlessly. We'll show you a modification end to end. We'll modify the front end React application. We'll push it through the code deployment pipeline, and out the other end, you'll see the changes in the UI. So let's get started. So now let's go ahead and execute our CI/CD pipeline. So let's suppose that I was a developer in an org and the business requirement came over to me asking to make a modification to this test conference application. Now, it wouldn't have to be the test conference application. It could be a Salesforce org. Either way, it might be a layout change, a new feature, a new custom object implemented. It wouldn't matter. The process would be the same. So what I would do is understand that now I would need to go in and modify the code for this particular application to go do that. And so I would navigate over to my development console, and in my development console, I'd find the source code for that particular splash page, and I would go ahead and execute the requirement. I would enter some new banner to that particular home screen. Then what I would do is I would go into the process of committing this change up to GitHub. In this case, it happens to be code commit, which under the hood utilizes the GitHub command line structure. So I would hit git add, git commit, adding new banner, git push, and in this case it happens to go to my front end branch that I've set up for this demo. So when I hit this, it would now make a commitment up to AWS code pipeline. Now code pipeline is just like we showed in the prior PowerPoint presentation, is made up of different phases. So there's a source phase, there's a build phase, and there's a deploy phase. In the source phase, what I did when I committed my code is I sent that new code to this repository. So if I go look in my source code on this particular repository on the front end branch, I would see within my screens, within my home, that I've just now added that particular requirement. Now, I need to get this particular set of code out into my environment, right? And so to do that, I would need to execute a build project. And so what this would do would be to take that code and then compile that code so that way it can be deployed. It would execute a small environment built out on Docker, and it would execute build artifacts that could be tested against. Now, in our case, just like that presentation showed, we have an integration with Jenkins. Again, no reason other than we know a lot of our customers use Jenkins. I could have easily done the same thing that Jenkins is doing within code commit, but it will execute some tests and it will utilize the Provar test suite to run those tests, just like Mike showed you, and return a response that says it either passed or failed. If it passed or failed, it would then progress from this build phase into my deployment. Just to show you really quickly what that's going to do on a common CI/CD pipeline is you would get any one of these deployments, and in any one of these deployments, it would show you a set of records, of some logs, of what was actually happening. And you could see that I would be deploying build artifacts over to S3, and I would be executing on any particular deployment a series of sequential steps in my build component, my build phase. The build phase would ultimately end up in a deployment if all things passed. And so you can see the deployment if I go over to the pipeline. Now the pipeline is nothing more than the container for all the different sources. So the source, the build, and the deploy are all maintained right here in the pipeline. So here's my source, my build, and my deploy. And again, it's important to understand that even though you don't see it here, within this build structure, within this build file, which is a build.yaml file that AWS utilizes, it is going to trigger Jenkins and it is going to execute Provar test cases that once passed will then promote to deployment. So let's turn it over to Mike so you can show you that Jenkins profile.
Thanks, Gabe. So I'll show you just some example output from the Jenkins build that was kicked off. This was a previous build. In the interest of time, we don't want to sit here and wait for it. But you can see that the build was successful. All of our test cases passed. And this is the output for that particular run. If I switch to my other view here, I can see all of my test cases laid out in the JUnit format from the Jenkins plugin. And you can see that all of those are passed there as well. And here's also where you can see that test case that I was showing you before, that email to case UI. So it also passed on my Jenkins build, as well as my test case that was executed against the React application that Gabe was working on. So all of my regression tests have passed. So at that point, it would be kicked off to the deploy phase where we would update the application.
Thanks, Mike. And to see the result of all of that code pipeline build, you can see that our new requirement has now been deployed to production. So that new banner is now out there in the wild and the application is now live and can be exposed to our end users. So in summary, what did you see? You saw how Provar is a process automation tool and it can fit within your CI/CD pipelines and it can help develop you in a DevOps culture and getting feature development out the door quicker. So there's that aspect. There's another one which comes in the form of dollars and cents. And this one isn't to be ignored either. If you consider the geographic dispersion of all the testing facilities across an enterprise, you could see differences in rates, and those rates ultimately add up. And it would be better if we could automate those particular processes and spend that money and that time on a capital project that's sitting on the product roadmap. Ultimately, what we want to do is get you to a place where you're achieving something that looks like this blue line. If you map total ownership cost to feature development, what we want to see is more features, but we only want to have an incremental adder to those features, to our total ownership cost. And if we can do that, you're going to achieve this blue line where the cost per feature is lower. And that's what we want to see. In general, companies, unfortunately, may in fact have this as a reality, where their cost profile looks more like a step function, where they have a particular capacity with their teams, and to get more out of those particular teams, they have to input a significant investment to get more teams, so that way they can keep up with the feature velocity. We don't want to see you do that. And with tools like Provar and process automation, inserting those back into a pipeline, we can help you achieve this blue line. And we'd love to talk to you about it. Thank you so much.